So welcome you all to my class. So this class is for undergraduate for semester 2, and here we will have as a syllabus groups and rings. Okay, so mostly the syllabus is mostly emphasized on groups. So before this, at our semester 1 for undergraduate level, we also had a very basic introduction about groups and rings. But in my course, I will start from the very beginning. I'll just assume that you have already learned about functions, relations, and all. So I don't may not be able to go through all the definitions in a very detailed way. But what I will do basically, I will recap few of the things today so that it will be much more clearer to all of you. So as you see that here the syllabus is, if you look at this portion of the whole syllabus, then this part is for group and this is for ring. So you can understand that this group part is much more than the ring part, around maybe twice the size of the rings. So mostly we'll emphasize on groups, and this course will be targeted for, I mean, a little more advanced level. For example, you will able to uh, appear for the JAM exam. After doing this course, you will see that all the questions that usually that comes to the JAM exam, or even for TIFR exam or ISI BSTAT exam, you will find few of them. And of course, for JAM exams, all the questions that will be discussed here. So since we'll teaching this group and ring, so in JAM syllabus till now the ring portion is not there, but of course the group things are already there. So I will cover up all those things with a lot of examples and a lot of exercises. I will give you lots of problems and you need to solve them, and we shall discuss on this topic rigorously. So that is the aim of the whole course. So the first thing that comes to our mind is what is basically a group. Okay. So if we go formally, then the term group. So as you all know that for group, we should have a non-empty set G along with some binary composition. So here G is a non-empty set and this is a binary operation. Operation on G. Okay. Then G composition is said to be a group if the following properties are satisfied. If few properties are satisfied. First one, can you tell me what would be the first one? Somebody? Okay,
Associativity.
associativity. That means for all ABC belongs to G, A composition B, composition C equal to A composition B composition C. That means you can interchange the brackets easily. That's the idea of associativity. Then next property.
Existence of identity.
Okay, identity. What does it mean? There exists an element E belongs to G such that E composition A equal to A composition E equal to A for all A belongs to G. That means there must be some element E. We call this element E as the identity element, which actually if you have a composition with any elements, that will give back to that element. Okay, that's why we call it identity element. And then last one is
Inverse.
Inverse.
inverse. Okay, what does it mean? For
Inverse.
each A belongs to G, there exists some element B belongs to G such that A composition B equal to B composition A equal to E. So it has to be true for every A. Okay. Now, one may surprise that there is another term called, we call it closure. And in this definition, I have not talked about closure. So one may raise this question, where is this closure? So if you remember, I started with G is a non-empty set and this is a binary operation on G. So if you go back to the definition of what do you mean by a binary operation, so what is that? So composition is a binary operation. So what does it mean? Binary operation means it's a mapping from G cross G to G. So from the definition of a mapping, so this is a binary composition means it is a mapping from G cross G to G. And from the definition, it's clear that if this is a mapping, so if I write it like A comma B, it should give me an element of A composition B, and that should be belongs to G. And from the definition of function or mapping, it's clear that this thing will always be within G, because from the definition of function, say if f is a function from a set A to B, what does it mean? It means that for each element A belongs to A, you must have a unique element. So you must have an element that must be associated with an element of B, that is denoted by f of A. So this f of A must always belongs to B. So that's why A composition B, which is nothing but a function applied on A comma B, and that gives me A composition B, and from the definition of function that this must belongs to G. So if I mention about binary operation or binary composition, then I do not need to refer to closure property, which says that for all AB belongs to G, A composition B belongs to G. That follows automatically if you refer this as a binary composition or binary operation. So if you talk about, start with this composition or dot or star as a binary operation, then you do not need to mention about closure property. But unfortunately, you may find that in few of the textbook, they also prefer to give this as a fourth property. Along with, they also mention about binary operation. So in case of a definition, usually we do not give anything extra, because the definition, it should be sleek and it should be, all the properties should be mentioned once, not more than one. So that's why for the standard books, for if you mention about binary operation, then there is no need to mention about closure property separately, because it is already included within the definition of binary operation. Is that clear? Okay. So as if we go back, then we came to function. So we know what do we mean by a function. There is another term usually we come across, it is relation. So relation on, say, relation from a set A to B. So what is the definition here? What do you mean by a relation from a set A to a set B? Can anybody tell me? What do you mean by a relation from a set A to B?
It is a subset of A cross B.
B. Very good. So a relation is nothing but a subset of A cross B. Okay. Now just try to find some examples. Suppose I have A equal to 1, 2 and say B equal to ABC. Okay. Now, what is then A cross B? A cross B, how many elements will be there in A cross B? How many elements? 6 elements. So let us try to write all of them. So 1 comma A, 1 comma B, 1 comma C, and then 2 comma A, 2 comma B, 2 comma C. So there are 6 elements. So cardinality of A cross B is nothing but, if I have all of them finite, then this should be cardinality of A into cardinality of B, if all of them A and B are finite. So this can be extended maybe further when you study the cardinality of a set, then you will be able to learn more about it. But for the time being, I assume that A and B are of finite sets, then suddenly you will have this property. Now any subset, consider any subset, say x1 is any subset of this, say 1A and say 1B. Now this is a subset of A cross B. So as I mentioned that a relation is nothing but any subset of A cross B, that means this is a relation from A to B. How this relation is defined? It says that 1 goes to A and again this same one goes to B. So that is a relation. Okay. But note that here this relation will certainly not be a function, because to have a function, what I said just now, the function is again a relation. So a function is again a relation, but this relation has to be defined on every element of the set which is on the left side. So as you can understand that here the relation is only defined only on 1, so not on 2. As a result, it can never be a function. Not only that, here 1 goes to 2 elements. Once it goes to A, another one, the same one goes to B. So that is also not a property for a function. So this is not a function. So we all know that a function is also a relation. Function is also a relation, but the converse is not true. But the converse is not true. Just now I have given this example. So this is an example of a relation, but not a function, from A to B. Is it clear to all of you? So this is an example of a function, of a relation which is not a function. Okay. So if I ask you this simple question, suppose I have a set, say A, having n elements, and if I ask you the question, how many relations that you can construct using A? Okay. So what will be the answer? Anybody? How many?
2 to
To
the
the
power
power
n
n
squared.
square.
Very good. So just now I have mentioned about what is a relation. A relation is nothing but a subset of. Say if R is a relation, if R is a relation on A, then R is nothing but a subset of A cross A. Okay. So any subset of A cross A is nothing but a relation. So actually the question that I ask you is, the question that I asked you here is basically finding how many subsets are there of A cross A. Just now I have seen that order of A cross A is nothing but n square, because it's nothing but order of A into order of A, so that is n square. Okay. Now if I ask you the question, if a set is there, say order n, then how many subsets of there of this set A? So the answer will be the cardinality of the power set. And what is the cardinality of the power set? This is 2 to the power of n. So here I want to find all subsets of A cross A. That means I need to find the cardinality of the power set of A cross A. And what is that cardinality? The cardinality of 2 to the power n square. So the number of relations on A is number of subsets of A cross A, and that is nothing but 2 to the power n square. Very good. Next, when we start with this relation, we came across few of the terms like reflexive, symmetric, and transitive. Many more, antisymmetric and all, but for the time being, I'm not going to details of all those things. Transitive. Okay. So can anybody tell me what do you mean by, suppose let I have the, for the base case, suppose I have a set. Let A be a set. Okay. Then suppose it's a non-empty set. Okay. Then when we say that A is reflexive, when we say that a relation set, let R be a relation, R be a relation on A, then R is reflexive when,
Every element of R related with itself.
okay, okay, so he says that every element of A is related to itself, right? That means that is A R A, for all A belongs to A, right? That means A and R is related. So somebody writes it in this way, R A B. Okay, somebody writes it A R A. Okay. Now, when it is said to be symmetric,
If A is related to B, then B must be related to A for
if
all.
A R B, so
Then that
we can say no, A R B implies B R A. Then,
for all
will,
AB belongs to A.
so what do you mean by for all AB belongs to A? So the question mark is here. What do you mean by for all AB belongs to A? Okay, then, so there is one question here for all. I will come to it later on. And then what is transitive? So A R B, B R C implies A R C. And then shall we write for all A B C belongs to A? Again, the question mark is what do you mean by for all? So here for all was there. Here also I have written for all. Here also I have written for all as mentioned by some of you. Okay. So they are the definitions. Now let me check with some of the examples with this for all at our mind. Now suppose my X is say, okay, my A is say 1, 2, 3. And I am writing an example, say row is 1, 1, 2, 2. Okay. So is it reflexive, symmetric, and transitive? What are they? So for reflexive, I will write R. For symmetric, I will write S. For transitive, I will write T. Now tell me, is it reflexive?
No.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, so reflexive, no. All of you? Okay, let me first finish it up, then I will discuss why. Is it symmetric?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it transitive?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now tell me why this is not reflexive.
3 is not related to itself.
So as 3 is not here missing, that's why here for all A, see, this is important. For all A belongs to A. So that means you need to relate with itself for all A. So it must be 3 should also be related to 3. Since 3 is related to 3 is missing here, as a result, you cannot talk about this row as reflexive. Is the answer clear to all of you? Why this is not? Because it misses 3, 3. If it includes 3, 3, then suddenly this will become a reflexive relation. But since C, it's for all A. So here A runs over A. That's why here A means 1, 2, and 3. So 1, 1 is there, 2, 2 is there, but 3, 3 is missing. So as this is a missing one, that's why this row can never be reflexive. Okay. Now tell me, what's about S? Whether it's symmetric or not. You tell me that it's a symmetric. Why this is symmetric? Why this is symmetric? So 1,
One is
row 1,
related to one. So
One
yes,
to one.
2 is
symmetric to
related.
itself.
But you say that just now you told me that for all AB. So here, since 3 was missing and for all was there, as a result, it was not reflexive. But here you mentioned about for all AB belongs to A, and it does not have for all AB, right? So here 3, nothing related to 3 is there. Then what will happen? Will that be symmetric? Now explain. So that's the debate. That's why I just pointed out here for all. Just now you have seen that as it was for all was mentioned, that's why you have to take care about 3 because 3 was missing here. But here the same thing, 3 is also missing here. If I write it for all AB, so AB runs over A, so 3 should also be take place in AB. But here 3 is not here. 3 is not here. Then will it be symmetric? Now, what is your argument? Try to answer me. Or do you want to modify the definition here? Or if you assume this for all AB belongs to A, will that be a symmetric relation? So it's a point. Now you need to understand it. And when this is clear, then you will find that all the answers regarding this part is clear to you. Okay. Anybody?
So not for all AB belongs to A.
So what should be your then definition for symmetry?
So A related to B implies B related to A as AB belongs to A.
Yes. So for all he has removed. Okay. Who has given this definition? Can you please mention who has?
Yes, sir.
What is your name?
Foundation.
Onnesha. So I write it Onnesha. AN. Okay. Now, do you agree with him?
Yes, sir.
So in mathematics, this for all, there exist, these two terms are very, very important. If you misuse them, your definition will be changed. Now you know the definition, the answers. You know, you have the basic idea about symmetry or antisymmetry or transitivity. But if you use for all here, then you will be stuck because for all as used here will no longer give you the symmetricness for this set if you are missing with this 3, 3. But if you remove this, just AB belongs to A, that is fine. Okay. Now, similar thing for transitive. You told that this is also transitive. So if you have this relation, 1 goes to 1 and here 2 goes to 2. So no common is there. Like 1 goes to say 2 and 2 goes to say 3. For example, this should be written as 1, 2 and then 2, 3. If this kind of things are there and to become a transitiveness of this set, it must contain 1 goes to 3. Okay. But since there is no common, so this end should be same as this, or maybe this end should be same as the beginning of this. If this kind of relation happens, then only you need to check. Otherwise, you don't need to worry anything about. Okay. So this is an example of a transitive relation which is not reflexive but symmetric and transitive. Okay. So the first part is done. Is it clear to all of you? Any question? Okay. Let me check with any other set. So again, my setup is same, is say 1, 2, 3, and let us R is defined in this way. Say 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and then 3, 1. Okay. Now tell me whether this is reflexive, symmetric, and transitive. Reflexive, symmetric, transitive. Is it reflexive? True
Yes,
or
sir.
false?
Yes, sir.
So what reflexive says? A row A for all A belongs to R. So you can see that all of them are there. A row A row A row A. But here it's not. But then how will you say that this is reflexive? So the question is, how will you justify that even if it is within your set, still it is reflexive, but it's not, like 3 is not related to 1. How will you say that this is, even if it is within your set R, still it's reflexive? Can anybody tell me? So the answer is, if you go back to the definition, it says that you need only to check whether A cross A, I mean A R A is present for all A or not. That means you do not bother anything else. That means in your set, these things must always be there. If you find that somebody from this set is missing, then suddenly it cannot be a reflexive one. But if they are present along with any subset, anything, along with anything is within that R, then suddenly with the property of this part, this becomes reflexive. Okay. So this is reflexive. That means to have the reflexive property, it is sufficient to have this, and you do not worry about what is there extra. So this is an extra one, but you do not worry, because this is the only part where the definition wants, nothing else. So if you add anything over this, for example, if you add with this 1, 3, then also it becomes reflexive because this part is already there. So if you draw it in this way, for example, if I have 1, 2, 3, and here also I have 1, 2, 3, and if you consider all pairs of this 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, and then 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 3. So basically that is the diagonal elements. So in every reflexive relation, all the diagonal elements, because you need to have for all A belongs to A, all the diagonal elements must be present within your symmetric relation, and anything else can also be a part of it. You do not need to worry about. So this, along with any subset of any of the remaining elements, if you take it any elements and if you construct any subset which has this part, then suddenly it will be reflexive one. Is the argument clear to all of you? Clear? Okay. Now the question is it symmetric?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Is it symmetric?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Why not?
1, 3 is missing.
So 1, 3 is missing. What symmetry says that? A row B implies B row A. So 1 comma 1 implies 1 comma 1, so this is fine, this is fine, this is fine. But if I consider 3 1, then to have this symmetry it must contain 1 3. So if you look at the image, or if you put it in that way, then it is 3 1. Okay, so this is 3 1. But to have the symmetry, if 3 1 is there, if I consider this as a mirror, then the mirror image, that means this one must also be present. That means if one of this image is there, its mirror image must also be there within your symmetrical one. So since the mirror is placed here, the image of this is again this image. So all of them are already there. Now if I consider this one, only this one, say 1 2 2 2, and they say 1 3 3 1. If I consider this, so I need to put comma here, then you see that this is not reflexive because 3 3 is not there, so you cannot have this reflexive property. But all the symmetry properties are there, so it's this one, and its image is itself this one, so it's present, it's present, these two are present along with this and this. Since I have not written for all, if I have written for all, then suddenly you cannot much see, or you cannot left with this 3 comma 3. You have to carry also this 3 comma 3. But here I have just mentioned a comma b belongs to a. Okay, similarly for transitive one also, you can see, is it transitive? Is this set transitive?
Yes, sir.
So it is transitive because this present and nothing ends with 1 and starts with 1 is there. So this is fine, this is fine, this is fine. So this is 3, means 3 goes to 3, and here this is 3 goes to 1, right? So if it is transitive, then starting and end must be there. So 3 goes to 1 must be there, and that is nothing but 3 comma 1, and which is also present. So this set is transitive. Okay, so okay, just a minute. Is it transitive? Like 3 1 and 1 1 is there. So what does it mean? That means it should be 3 goes to 1, that is 3 1, that is also present. Okay, so you need to also check with this one because it ends with 1 and it starts with 1. So this element may also be compatible, but still you can see that 3 1 is also there, so you don't need to be worried about. So this set is also a transitive one. Okay, it was not symmetric, but it is reflexive, symmetric, and reflexive, not symmetric but transitive. Is it clear? Okay, now let us try to think about, suppose again my a is say 1 2 3. Okay, can you tell me the smallest subset? Now I think it's clear to you why this phi related to phi, maybe. Okay, I will come to it later on. Okay, but suppose a is there, and what is the smallest subset of a cross a, which is all, that means which is reflexive, symmetric, and transitive. So my question is, what is the smallest subset of a cross a, which is reflexive, symmetric, and transitive? Can somebody tell me?
Sir, the relation
1 comma
contains
1
1
2
1
comma
2
2
2
3
3
comma
3.
3.
Good. So that means the diagonal elements. Okay, that means 1 comma 1, 2 comma 2, and then 3 comma 3. Okay, so this is the smallest subset of a cross a, which are all reflexive, symmetric, and transitive. Now tell me, instead of the smallest, what is the largest?
A cross A.
Say A
Yes.
cross A.
So the largest subset would be the A cross A, which contains all the elements of the power set of A cross A, right? I mean, not a power set of A cross A, I mean, which is nothing but the A cross A. Is it clear to all of you? So it contains all the elements of this ordered pair form. So that is the largest and this is the smallest. Okay. Now let me come to the counting. This is also quite interesting, and in many of your JAM exam or many other competitive exam, you will find this question. So what is this question? The question is, let order of a set is in how many reflexive relations are there on A. Similar question, how many symmetric relations are there on A? So transitive and antisymmetric, they are little different, but for the time being, I'll just discuss with this part. Okay. Now, can anybody be quickly tell me, suppose order of A, so suppose order of A is 3. So how many reflexive relations are there on A? How to count?
2
So
to
I
the
have
power
2
2
to
to
the
the power
power.
6.
Okay, somebody says 2 to the power 6. So if this is in terms of n, how many?
2 to the power n
N is to minus n.
Which is our n square minus n.
Very good. So I have already given you a clue how to find the reflexive relation. As I just now mentioned, so if I draw like this in a triangle, sorry, in a rectangle or in a square matrix, then the diagonals. So these diagonal elements must be present. So there are many other cross diagonal elements or other than the diagonal elements. Okay. So if you have a n cross n matrix, how many elements are there in the diagonal elements? There are n many such elements. So how many elements are there in the whole matrix? N square. So there are n square many elements in the whole matrix, out of which there are n many elements which are on the diagonal. Now, as I just now mentioned, to become a reflexive relation, all the subsets must contain this. So they are must. So what you need to check? You need to find all subsets of A cross A that contains these diagonal elements, right? So how many other elements are there? So there are altogether n square many elements in the whole graph, whole matrix, out of which there are n many elements which are on the diagonal. So now they are basically elements which are not on the diagonal. And if you consider any subset of this many elements, and if you make a union of this with that subset, then suddenly that will be a reflexive relation. So for example, suppose I have 1, 2, 3 elements here. So diagonals are 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. I am not giving the commas. Okay. Now, so how many total elements are there? In case of 3, there are 9 elements, out of which 3 of them are in the diagonal. That means there are 6 elements. For example, here I have, this is 2, 1, this is 2, 2, sorry, 2, 3, and so on. Now take any element, any subset with these 6 elements. So how 6 elements are there? Take any subset. For example, say I have taken 1 and 2 3. Suddenly this is not a reflexive relation, but if I union with this set, then suddenly this will be a reflexive relation, because to become a reflexive relation it is sufficient to have only this part and anything beyond this. So I have constructed one set from the elements which are outside this diagonal, and then I just make an union with this. So that will suddenly be a reflexive relation. So the question is, how many such subsets are there? There are this many elements which are off diagonal or which are not on the diagonals, and take any subsets of this. How many subsets that you can construct? 2 to the power n such many subsets that you can construct having elements from outside the diagonal elements, and just take a union from any of this subset. That will give you the reflexive relation. So the total number of reflexive relation is nothing but how many? 2 to the power n square minus n. Okay, that we have already calculated. Now my question is, how many symmetric relations are there?
2 to the power n into n plus 1 by 2.
So he says that 2 to the power n into n plus 1 by 2. Now tell me how to calculate this one. How do you get this? Okay, again the argument is very easy. Can anybody be able to tell me?
Sir,
So
here
because there are
Yes, tell me.
n diagonal elements, and
Yes,
if you take any element in the subset will be uh, symmetric,
yes,
and the total possibility of symmetric subset from the n diagonal element will be 2 to the power n square, and
2 to
from
the power
other
n.
sorry 2 to the
Yes,
power n,
yes,
from other n square minus n element, if we put any element in the subset like suppose 1 3, then there must be 3 1, and this like
yes.
element will be n square minus n by 2, and the possibility will be 2 to the power n square minus n by 2. Then the total possibility will be 2 to the power n
Into,
into 2 to the power n square minus n by 2.
yes. So 2 to the power n plus n square minus n by 2, and that becomes 2 to the power 2n plus n square minus n by 2, and that becomes 2 to the power n square plus n by 2 is 1 by 2, the same as what he claimed just now. Okay, so is it clear to all of you? Okay, or other way you can do is, basically first you understand that in any symmetric calculation, if something off diagonal is there, then their mirror image must also be there. Okay, so first try to find out what are basically the number of elements in the upper half, because this is the diagonal element and the mirror is already there within it. So the mirror image of this point is the point itself. Similarly, the point itself, the point itself. So try to find out how many elements are there which are just upper half of this diagonal. So in matrix sense, we call it upper triangular matrices. Okay, so how many elements are there here? So total n square many elements were there. Total altogether n square many elements in the matrix, out of which n were there in the diagonal. And as you know, since this is an n square n cross n matrix, due to the symmetry, if this is there, it must be there. So there is one-to-one correspondence between the elements of here and the elements of here, upper triangular and lower triangular elements. That means you can just simply safely divide it by 2. So there are this many elements on the off diagonal or upper diagonal things, okay, except for this n. Now, so any subset of this, any subset from this will also be a symmetric. Similarly, any subset, you can choose any point from the diagonal as well. So how many choices are there? N choices are there, right? So if you consider all the number of elements of anything, including the diagonal, there are n square minus n by 2 plus n many elements are there. And if you take any subset of it, then that will certainly give you a symmetric relation. And that's why the total number of these subsets will be 2 to the power of this. So this is the count of total number of elements of this set. I mean of the symmetric relation. Is it clear to all of you? Any question till now? Have you any doubt or question? Any question if you have, please ask me. Okay. So assume that you do not have any question. Okay. Very good. Now can you tell me, question, how many symmetric relations are there with, say, 1 2 and 2 1 with this as a subset? That means my question is, how many symmetric relations are there, say, on the same set A equal to 1 2 3 with this as a subset? That means whatever be the your symmetric relation, this two elements will always be there in all the symmetric relations. So is the question clear? How many symmetric relations are there on the set 1 2 3 with this as a subset? That means suppose you are considering only 1 2 and 2 1. Will that be a symmetric relation, true or false? Is it symmetric? Is this relation symmetric?
Yes, sir.
This is
Yes,
symmetric.
sir.
Similarly, if I consider 1 2 2 1 1 1, then that is also a symmetric relation, right? So you can see that this is there within this. So my question is, how many symmetric as well as how many reflexive relations are there? Reflexive relations are there with this as a subset. Is the question clear? So this is for your take home. So maybe I will ask in the next class. But the question is clear to all of you? Good. Okay. So you have seen now a lot of things. So relation, the most important thing for the definition of relation is basically the set. So it is nothing but a set. Now if I ask you the question, what is set? Can anybody tell me what is a set? What is a set?
Collection of well-defined distinct element is called set.
Very good. Collection of well defined. Then what you told? Collection of well defined
Distinct element.
distinct elements is called a set. Everybody agrees with it? Okay.
The
So
element independent of order.
okay, elements. So somebody introduced something more. Elements. Then you have introduced independent of what?
Order.
Order. Okay. Anybody else want to introduce or modify this definition? So everybody understood this definition, I guess, right? Okay. But the question is, I am not very well comfortable with this definition. For me, I do not understand it properly. Okay. Who said that well defined? Can you define me? What do you mean by well defined? Remember that you are going to define the definition of a set. So keeping in your mind that you are going to define a set, and now I want to know what do you mean by well defined. So the student who explained this definition can explain me a bit what is well defined. I understand what do you mean by a collection. I understand individually. I understand what do you mean by a distinct. I understand what do you mean by element. I understand what is independent. Not very clear till. And also, what do you mean by an ordering? That is also not very clear to me. And what I need to know, I need to know a very basic thing. That is the set. What is the definition of a set? And in this context, somebody gave this definition, and this part is really unknown to me. So can anybody explain me what do you mean by well defined? Okay, so who gave this definition? The definition was written on the book, that's true. But who gave this definition?
Sir, I'm
Okay. Can you just explain me what do you mean by your definition is perfectly okay because that's most of the books they write it like this. Can you explain me what do you mean by well defined? Okay, anybody else? So you all know sets, I'm sure. From your very childhood, you are dealing with sets, and so you know sets, and maybe at your undergraduate level, at the beginning of your undergraduate level, you have started dealing with this kind of definition, and the definition is also written on the book. May not be this part with this, but of course, the red part is certainly written on some books, but well definedness is not clear to me. Okay, in this context, let us. So I am sure that you all know sets, right? So in this context, let us try to have some uh, nice statement, and you need to interpret it in terms of a set. Okay. So suppose there is a city, may not be very big city, maybe a town or something, but remember this is a city or maybe a town, and a barber is there. So you all know barber who actually cuts the hairs and shaves our beard and all. Okay. So there is a barber who shaves or cuts your hair or your beard, and the point is he lives in that city. Okay. So he is a member of that city. That means if you call a set C to be a set, then the barber B belongs to that set city C. Okay. Now, uh, the what is the basically aim of this barber? Okay. So he has a special kind of statement that he saves. That means cutting their beard and all. He saves all and only those who do not save themselves. What does it mean? He save, in Bengali we call it দাড়ি কাটা, all, সবার দাড়ি কাটে, and only those, this is also very important, and only those who do not save themselves, means যারা নিজের দাড়ি নিজে কাটে না তাদের সবার মানে সেইটা হলেই তবে কাটবে, নিজের দাড়ি নিজে কাটতে যদি না পারে, then only this barber cuts their, saves them, and he saves all. So he saves all and only those who do not save themselves. Okay, is the statement clear to all of you? That means he saves all and only those who do not save themselves. For example, suppose I use my own kit to save my beard. Okay, so the barber doesn't cut my hair or doesn't cut my that doesn't saves me. Okay, but somebody is there who is unable to save himself, so that's why he goes to the barber, and all the persons who are there in the city must follow this, obey this rule. Okay, okay, if I ask you this question, does the barber save himself, means সেই নাপিত কি নিজের দাড়ি নিজে কাটে? This is my question. Now try to frame in terms of a set theory. So what was my point? The point was I started with a set, say city is the city, set of all people, it is set of all people in the city. Okay, so this is set of all people within the city, and B is the barber. So must be B belongs to C. Now tell me how to construct a set from this statement. So if I construct this x to be the set, all members of the city, such that, can somebody tell me what would be? So this C is same as C. So member means who are the inhabitant of that city, such that, now tell me what should I write in terms of B? So all such member M such that B saves all, B saves all, and only those who do not save themselves. Okay, is the set clear to all of you? So you all know sets. Now if I ask you the question, is B belongs to X, what would be your answer? What would be your answer? Is the question clear to all of you? Think and let me give me the answer. So that was the criteria. So the question is, does the barber save himself? Try. Suppose the barber saves himself. Okay. Then it says that, what it says? if it says saves himself, then suddenly Barber will not cut him, or Barber will not save him, because only those who do not save themselves, for them only the Barber is there. But if Barber saves himself, then suddenly, according to this rule, Barber will not save himself. That means you are getting a contradiction, that if Barber saves himself, then according to this rule, Barber will not save himself, because Barber saves to whom? Those who are unable to save themselves. That means if the Barber won't save himself, then according to this rule, Barber must save himself. And if Barber saves himself, then according to this rule, it says that Barber cannot save that Barber. So it's a contradiction. Is the contradiction clear to all of you? Suppose in that way, I mean, it's a broader way, I just write it in a lighter way. Suppose B belongs to X, suppose. Then what will happen? If B belongs to X, then according to this rule, B, those who do not save themselves, that means the Barber is unable to save themselves. Okay, but Barber can save himself. So it's a contradiction. Again, if B does not belongs to X, then what happens? That means if Barber B does not belongs to X, means that Barber saves himself. Okay, and if Barber save himself, then it will be a problem. Then it will be a problem. So in any case, the question that this Barber, does the Barber save himself? If you say yes, then also from this condition you will have problem. If you say no, then also you will have the same problem. That means deciding whether the Barber will belong to that category or not, it's a difficult one. So the description that I have given is really not a set. And that's why when you do not have any kind of this kind of ambiguity, then we call it well defined. So my dear friends, you will be surprised to know that to define this set, it's a part of, we call it mathematical logic or foundation of mathematics. It has a very long and very interesting history. It's a history of 19th century. Okay, so it called foundation of mathematics or mathematical logic. In that part, usually these definitions are being discussed, and these definitions are not very easy. That's why most of the good books, they say that we are not really defining the set S or the set, we are not giving the proper definition of a set, but assume that the set that you know. That means we have all some idea about set and consider that to be a set definition of a set. So that's why most of the books, they avoid to define set, because it's a part of mathematical logic, it's a part of foundation of mathematics that started long back, and this is known as Russell paradox. So Russell paradox is something else, but to make it easier or to make it more interesting, this Barber paradox is being presented. Okay, so you can search it in Google. What do you mean by Russell's paradox? Russell's paradox. And it has a very uh, interesting history. Uh, so basically, when it started, so topology, real analysis, algebra, classical analysis, complex analysis, they are all branches of mathematics, but they were actually independent at that time. So during that time, many mathematicians they tried to find some ways so that all of them that could be combined together, so that there must be some relation between each and every subject. That's why this foundation of mathematics is very important, and the definition of set is not that easy. So now I think I have given a basic idea, but it's not all. It's a very intuitive and very generic, interesting way of representation. But to know more about it, you must have a look at this Russell paradox and all the history related to that. And that's not very easy, and that's a very one established topic of mathematics known as mathematical logic. So there, some part of it is been discussed there. Okay. So we have seen now the relations, functions, as well as sets. So all the things that are required for my group are now ready with lots of previous things that we have already discussed. So what the things that we have already discussed is basically the binary composition, binary operations, then relations, and different relations like equivalence relation. That means it must be all the things must be there: reflexive, symmetric, and transitive. If three of the relations satisfied altogether, then we call this relation as the equivalence relation on some set. Okay, and then very vaguely the definition of set. So all the prerequisites for a group is ready to all of us. Okay. Now the question that usually that comes to our mind is very simple question that just now I have already explained those things. Okay. So in algebra, what are the things that we are usually does? So number theory, you might have heard about many integers, primes, etc. So when we deal with all those things, we call that thing as a number theory. So group theory is already there in your syllabus. Ring theory will be there. Field theory is there. You might have come across the definition of field. Then in linear algebra, you have also started learning about vector spaces, and it's known as module theory, which is a generalization of this vector space. So all the things are there, broadly speaking, in algebra in a bigger sense. So the question that comes to our minds are, is there any application of algebra? Okay. So let me try to explain few examples where you will find lots of applications of algebra. So we all are very fond of watching the animated movies, and you will be surprised to know that in case of animated movies, this linear algebra, especially this linear transformation, which you may not come across yet, but you will be listening or you will be taught very soon, this linear transformation, they play an important role. So that's basically a vector space and all their properties. So they play an important role in formation of this kind of animated movies. So you might have heard about the term MATLAB or Mathematica. So they are basically the softwares where you can do lots of big data analysis very quickly. Like you can multiply two big numbers, you can add, subtract, make up, kind of make a factorial of a big number, and etc. So this MATLAB, it stands for matrix laboratory. So from the name, it's clear that it involves the matrix multiplication and matrix operation, vector methods and all. So within the name itself, it says that it's basically lots of linear algebraic techniques are being used in case of matrix laboratory or MATLAB. So many of us, we are very much fond about music. So sometimes we listen MP3 or MP4 players or MP3 musics. So basically they are the compressed data. So to compress data, sometimes we use zip or RAR file. So to compress data, linear algebra plays an important role. So nowadays, this big data analysis or analytic are one of the very buzzwords, and there also lots of linear algebraic techniques are being used. So when we talk using our mobiles or sometimes the images from the satellites, they when come to us, for example, say some satellite from Mars, it's sending some image to our Earth, say to NASA. So it actually has to, the signal has to travel through a, I mean, very long range or long path. So while it comes, lots of distraction it faces. For example, some ultraviolet ray may modify the signal. For example, it was coming as a 0, but due to some ultraviolet ray or some atmospheric changes, the 0 becomes 1. That means some error happened during that bit. Now, when the NASA or say ISRO they receive this image, then the question is how to recover the original image, because many places some modification has been done due to the traversal of such a long path. Okay. So there is a technique called coding theoretic technique. Error correcting codes are important, where the linear codes are nothing but the elements of a vector space. That means the linear algebra plays an important role in case of communication or in case of mobile communication. So number theory are also, abstract algebra are also very important, especially for cyber security. So usually when we get up in the early morning, in today's scenario, before going for brush or uh, doing anything else, we usually go for our mobile and try to give some kind of password on the screen, or maybe some crazy arrows, like crazy symbols or some crazy patterns that we put on our mobile to unlock the screen. Now, if I ask you the question, simple question, why do you put the password on your screen? A simple answer could be just to avoid our parents or our younger brother or sister, so that he or she won't be able to get into your mobile very easily. Okay. Uh, so using this mobile, after that we do a lot of things, like we check our email, we chat with friends, we buy things, we check the newspapers, we talked with using WhatsApp. Maybe even in the luxurious time also, we also leisure time also we use mobiles. Not only that, when we go for our, I mean, go to the bed, the mobile is with us, and sometimes it happens that the mobile stays with us whole night. And all the things are being done very easily by installing lots of applications that are installed at our mobile. And with these applications, we find that the operation of mobile is so easy that a small child can operate it very easily or very comfortably. So we feel very confident that everything is within our hand. Here, what we want to emphasize is we need a cyber security, because a lot of things nowadays are being done using your mobiles. For example, when we chat with somebody using our WhatsApp, you might have heard about the term end-to-end encryption. That means it says that not only anybody else, it's impossible for WhatsApp to know what is being sent. So that's why it says that it's very secure way of communication, so that nobody will able to understand what is being sent. Also, sometimes we do a lot of online shopping and online transaction. For example, when you order something using paying your credit card or debit card, you find that you are basically paying money using your credit card or debit card using your mobile or laptop. So many important documents you need to upload, you need to share with them, like your card number, the OTP that you get from your mobile, and etc. And after that, the transaction happens. So the question is, how do you get the confidence that okay, even if we do these things, we are a little bit safe? So the thing is that the big prime numbers give us a lot of confidence to do lots of this kind of secure communication. So this is an example of a very big prime number. So it's consists of 904 digits. So just looking at it, it would be very difficult for you to understand whether this is prime or not. But since I am telling to you that this is a prime, so you have to believe that this is a prime number. But the question is, how did I get this? And you will be surprised to know that getting this big prime number is not a very big deal, because by using my this small laptop, I can make it by within say 30 seconds to 40 seconds. I can make this big primes. So here, lot of abstract algebra and number theory are involved to get this big primes, and these big primes are very much useful for day-to-day communication in a secure fashion. So there are plenty of applications in our day-to-day life where usually we use abstract algebra, linear algebra, number theory for doing the things. So that question actually haunted me from my undergraduate level when I started abstract algebra. The name abstract, it says that everything is abstract, but though it everything is abstract, but there are plenty of applications which actually shows the beauty of the subject. So in this course, we'll actually go for more of the applications along with all the details of group theory and ring theory, and then I will go a little bit of number theory as well to show you how this big primes or how this abstract algebra or number theory are playing an important role into our day-to-day life. So that is the whole goal of the whole class. So any question till now? If you have, please ask me any question if you have. Any question? Okay, if you don't have any question, then fine. So the first thing that we'll go for is from our group theory is symmetry. So symmetry plays an important role in our day-to-day life. Okay, so you can see that here it's very symmetric. So there are basically different type of symmetries, four types mostly: rotation, translation, reflection, and it's a mixed kind of glide reflection. Okay, so these symmetries play an important role in abstract algebra as well. So in our next class, we'll show you how the symmetries plays an important role in group theory, and we'll go little beyond of that. Okay, so any question till now?